By what principle can electricity be generated even without a permanent magnet? Electromagnetic induction. Which scientist first explained the body's immune response? Louis Pasteur. Why does water move upward through a plant's stem? Because of transpiration. What is the structure that both human and plant cells share, which surrounds the outermost part of the cell, called the cell membrane? Cell membrane. Why do clothes fade in color when left in the sunlight for a long time? Because of decomposition caused by light. Why is Mars a major target for exploration? Because of the possibility that it could support life. What is the smallest particle that makes up matter? An atom. Among the heavy metals, what is the only element that is in the liquid state at room temperature? Mercury. What is the atomic number of an oxygen atom? 8. What do we call the phenomenon in which a substance in the liquid state changes into a gas? Vaporization. What is the system called that regulates the pH of blood? Buffer system. What structures in plant leaves carry out gas exchange? Stomata. During human digestion, which enzyme digests fats? Lipase. What is the membrane that protects the brain and spinal cord called? Meninges. What is the collective term for the organs that secrete hormones? Endocrine system. What is the longest part of the human digestive tract? Small intestine. Which type of rock makes up most of the oceanic crust? Basalt. What is the planet that is closest to Earth in the solar system? Venus. What is the force by which two objects attract each other? Gravity. When light is reflected from a surface, what is the relationship between the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection? They are equal. What phenomenon does the Doppler effect describe? A change in frequency depending on the direction of motion. Among Earth's internal structures, which layer is located on the outermost side? The crust. Which scientist proposed the theory of continental drift? Wegener. Which layer inside Earth is the hottest? The inner core. Which electromagnetic wave has the shortest wavelength? Gamma rays. What relationship does the angle of reflection have in light reflection? The angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. What happens when resistors are connected in series in an electric circuit? The total resistance increases as the resistances add. Which scientist first discovered genes? Mendel. Which physical quantity determines pitch among the three elements of sound? Frequency. What is the basic concept of isotopes? Atoms with the same atomic number but different numbers of neutrons. Which type of seismic wave is the fastest? The P wave. In which layer of Earth's atmosphere is the ozone layer located? The stratosphere. What is the main component of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere? Carbon dioxide. What is a representative celestial body in which nuclear fusion occurs? The Sun. What is the main factor that affects the refractive index of light? The density of the medium. To slow down or stop a moving object, what kind of force must act on it? A force opposite to the direction of motion. Through what kind of material is sound transmitted? A medium. What determines the loudness of a sound? The amplitude. In the process of hearing with the ear, what role does the eardrum play? It transmits vibrations. Why does a light bulb turn on when a battery is connected? Because an electric current flows. What is the sac-like structure in plant cells that stores water, nutrients, waste products, and so on? The vacuole. What force allows a moving car to come to a stop? Frictional force. By what principle does a 3D printer create objects? Building up material layer by layer. What is the name of the system that protects our body from invading pathogens? The immune system. Why do we usually not catch the same disease easily after being infected once? Because of memory cells. Why does the surface of Mars appear red? Because the surface soil contains a large amount of iron oxide, rust. What is the function of the cerebellum? Control of movement and maintenance of balance. What do we call the device that a robot uses to move? An actuator. Which particles make up an atom? Electrons, protons, and neutrons. What do we call a small group formed by many stars gathered together? A star cluster. What is it called when dry ice changes directly into a gas? Sublimation. For what purpose is a seismograph used? To record earthquakes. What kind of light does a TV remote control use to send signals? Infrared light. How does damage to the medulla oblongata affect the maintenance of life? It can cause breathing to stop. What style of problem solving does AI attempt to imitate? The human thought process. Which part of the brain integrates sensation and movement to make judgments? The cerebrum. What change occurs in breathing when you do exercise that uses a lot of muscles? It becomes deeper and faster. In what way do the respiratory system and the circulatory system cooperate? In transporting oxygen. Why does blood circulate throughout the entire body? Because of the pumping action of the heart. What is needed for sediments to become sedimentary rock? Pressure and cementation. The reason we must wear seat belts is due to which law? The law of inertia. What change is occurring in marine ecosystems due to rising temperatures? Coral bleaching. What device helps to keep a drone's video from shaking? Gimbal. Why can vaccines prevent the spread of infectious diseases? They block transmission by building immunity. How does the sun produce energy? Nuclear fusion reactions. Which part of the brain is mainly responsible for thinking and learning? The cerebral cortex. What substances are used when nerve cells transmit information to one another? Neurotransmitters. What is one effect that lack of sleep can have on the brain? Decline in memory. Which metal is used to block radiation? Lead. What is the name of the largest coral reef region in the world? The Great Barrier Reef. What are the two types of photoreceptor cells in the human eye that detect light? Rods and cones. What are the dark spots on the surface of the sun called? Sunspots. Between xylem and phloem in plants, which tissue transports sugars? The phloem. What is the phenomenon called in which the high salinity and density of seawater create deep ocean circulation patterns? Thermohaline circulation. What type of battery supplies a constant direct current? A direct current battery. What is the International Wind Speed Unit used to indicate the intensity of a typhoon? Knot. What is the programmed cell death, essential for development and often called cell suicide, known as? Apoptosis. What is the phenomenon called in which the line width of computer CPU circuits is reduced to the nanometer scale? Fabrication process scaling. In thermodynamics, which law states that the entropy of a perfect crystal becomes zero at absolute zero temperature? The third law of thermodynamics. Which scientists discovered the double helix structure of DNA? Watson and Crick. What are the structures in a cell that contain genetic information called? Chromosomes. Which molecule is composed of 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms? Glucose. What is the central organ that circulates blood throughout the entire body? The heart. What is the phenomenon in which light is sent back at the boundary between different media? Reflection. What do we call the process by which heat moves directly within a liquid or a gas? Convection. What is the phenomenon called when light passes through a prism and splits into many colors? Dispersion. What mainly caused the large and small craters on the surface of the Moon? Meteorite impacts. In the periodic table, what is a vertical column called? Group. What do you call metals that readily lose electrons and become cations? Active metals. What is the unit used to express the intensity of sound? Decibel. Why can a hot pot crack if you pour cold water on it? Because of differences in thermal expansion. What change occurs in brain function when emotions become extreme? Overactivation of the amygdala. Why do emotions linger in the body? Because the action of hormones continues. What is the deepest part of the seafloor topography called? An ocean trench. When a tropical depression develops so that its maximum wind speed is at least 17 meters per second, what does it become? A typhoon. What is the number of vibrations or waves that repeat in 1 second called? Frequency. In DNA, what is the region that encodes the synthesis of a specific protein called? A gene. Which cell organelle generates energy within the cell? Mitochondria. What is the main cause of tides, the rising and falling of sea level? The Moon's gravitational pull. What do we call water that falls from the sky, such as rain, snow, and hail? Precipitation. What do you call the day when the lengths of day and night are equal on Earth? The vernal or autumnal equinox. What do you call the huge waves generated on the seafloor by an earthquake? Tsunami. What do you call material composed of small particles produced when rocks are weathered and eroded? Soil. What do you call the phenomenon in which hot water rises to Earth's surface due to internal heat? A hot spring. What do you call the movement of seawater caused by differences in salinity and temperature? Ocean currents. What do you call the region surrounding Earth that is controlled by its magnetic field? The magnetosphere. When the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere increases, what major changes occur in Earth's environment? Global temperature rise and intensified climate change. Which planet in the solar system has rings that are clearly visible? Saturn. Why does the outside of a stainless steel cup become foggy? Condensation of water vapor. What does a carbon footprint refer to? An individual's greenhouse gas emissions. When wet laundry dries, what kind of change of state occurs? Vaporization. What kind of substance turns litmus paper blue? A basic substance. What is the main component of natural gas and the simplest hydrocarbon? Methane. What is the phenomenon called when water droplets form on the outside surface of a glass containing a cold drink? Condensation. Which kind of change is related to the heat produced by a hand warmer in winter? An exothermic reaction. Which phenomenon is related to the cool feeling when spray is released from a can? Vaporization. With which type of change is the decrease in volume related when ice cream melts? Melting. Which kind of precipitation is formed when water droplets in clouds freeze? Snow. What phenomenon is caused by the tilt of Earth's axis of rotation? The seasons. Among the types of clouds, which cloud forms at the highest altitudes? Cirrus cloud. Among volcanic ejecta, what are the largest rock fragments called? Volcanic bombs. Before rain falls, what is the process called in which small water droplets in clouds merge together? Coalescence. What is the heaviest element found at Earth's center? Iron. Which planet in the solar system has the highest atmospheric pressure at its surface? Venus. Which planet appears the brightest as observed from Earth? Venus. What do we call a region where sound cannot propagate? A vacuum. In which direction does conventional electric current flow? From the positive terminal to the negative terminal. What is the force called that acts opposite to the direction of an object's motion? Friction. What is the phenomenon called when light bends as it passes from air into water? Refraction. What do we call red, green, and blue? Primary colors of light. In what state is an object that is producing sound? It is vibrating. On a frictionless inclined plane, how does the speed of an object change? It accelerates. What is the property of light called whereby it travels in straight lines? Rectilinear propagation. What is the property of an object that tends to maintain its initial state of motion called? Inertia. What is the phenomenon called when light bounces off a mirror? Reflection. When an object undergoes circular motion, in which direction does the acting centripetal force point? Toward the center. What shape of lens can converge light to a single point? Convex. What happens to a magnet's magnetic force when it is heated? It decreases. As the force applied to an object increases, how does its acceleration change? It increases. As the wavelength of a sound wave becomes longer, how does the pitch of the sound change? It becomes lower. When light bulbs are connected in series, how does their brightness change? It decreases. When the contact surfaces of two objects become rougher, how does the frictional force between them change? It increases. What is a representative phenomenon that uses the reflection of sound? An echo. What is the smallest unit of a pure substance that cannot be further decomposed? An atom. What kind of substance turns litmus paper red? An acid. What is the name of the nervous system that includes the brain and spinal cord? The central nervous system. What is the tissue that connects bones to muscles in the human body? Tendons. What are the cells that transmit detected stimuli to the brain called? Nerve cells. What are the openings in plants through which carbon dioxide is absorbed and oxygen is released? Stomata. What is the structure in roots through which plants absorb water, rather than through stems or leaves? Root hairs. In a paper cup telephone, what is the medium through which the sound is transmitted? String. In which direction does the moon orbit Earth? Counterclockwise. What is the most abundant gas in Earth's atmosphere? Nitrogen. What is the shape of our galaxy? Spiral. Which layer inside Earth is the hottest? The inner core. An object's mass is the same everywhere, so why does its weight differ? Because gravity is different. Why is the sun's altitude in the sky different in the northern and southern hemispheres? Because of the tilt of Earth's rotational axis. What is the name of the green cell organelle in plants where photosynthesis occurs? Chloroplast. What is the largest organ in the human body? The skin. What is the characteristic shape of a snake's tongue? A forked tongue. Saliva begins the breakdown of which nutrient? Carbohydrates. What do we call animals that maintain a constant body temperature? Homeothermic animals. Where are human red blood cells produced? In the bone marrow. Where are the digestive enzymes in the human mouth produced? In the salivary glands. Which cells produce antibodies in an immune response? B lymphocytes. What is the main muscle that controls breathing movements? The diaphragm. Among the products of photosynthesis, what is the main storage nutrient? Glucose. What gas makes up the largest proportion of the air? Nitrogen. In which state does evaporation occur most readily? Gas. In a chemical reaction, what does not disappear when reactants change into products? Mass. Among the main components of air, which element has the lowest boiling point? Nitrogen. What do we call the bonds between atoms that make up a substance? Chemical bond. What substance readily absorbs moisture from the air? Calcium chloride. In flame tests used for ion detection, which metal produces a violet flame? Potassium. Which colors of light do plants mainly absorb during photosynthesis? Red and blue. About how many times does the human heart beat in one day? About 100,000 times. What is the atomic number of oxygen? Eight. What are the light-sensing cells in the eye called? Rod cells and cone cells. Who first presented the theory of evolution in a systematic way? Charles Darwin. Which greenhouse gas is considered the main culprit of global warming? Carbon dioxide. What do we call a material that does not conduct electricity? An insulator. Which planet in the solar system is the only one known to harbor life? Earth. What is the tendency of a plant stem to grow upward, against gravity, called? Negative gravitropism. Which gas is most abundant in the lava emitted during a volcanic eruption? Water vapor. What is the safest method for observing sunspots? The projection method. Where do plants mainly store starch? In roots or seeds. What do we call the process in which rocks weather, are deposited, and then form new rocks? The rock cycle. What air pollutants are mainly produced when fossil fuels are burned? Carbon dioxide and fine dust particles. In a wave, how does the sound change as the amplitude increases? It sounds louder. Where is the coldest place on Earth? Vostok Station in Antarctica. What is the average salinity of seawater, in percent? About 3.5%. Where is Earth's magnetic field mainly generated? Convection in the outer core. What is the phenomenon called in which plankton make the sea turn red? Red tide. What type of inheritance does not follow Mendel's laws of heredity? Linked inheritance. What is the largest bay on Earth? Bay of Bengal. Why is the color of human urine yellow? Urobilin. During DNA replication, what is the enzyme that builds the new strand? DNA polymerase. What is the largest glacier on Earth? The Antarctic ice sheet. What is the strongest magnetic celestial object in the universe? Magnetar. What type of rock mainly makes up Earth's oceanic crust? Basalt. Thanks for watching all the way through. Share your science knowledge in the comments. Your support helps us create even more science quizzes. See you in the next one.